Now go in there, get your mop, do your job, and shut your
The story begins on a calm summer night in Kansas City, as Chris drives down an empty stretch of road with his girlfriend beside him and their two friends in the back seat. They're all enjoying prom night to the fullest, but Chris wants to make it even more memorable, so he turns off the headlights and puts the top down, allowing them to see the fireflies up close and fully appreciate the breathtaking view. However, his friends think it's too risky.
Hey, you can turn the lights back on.
Yeah, dude, come on.
They're so beautiful.
Told you, right?
Chris, please, you're freaking me out.
There's more up there.
He finally turns them back on, but by then it's already too late. Despite his attempts to swerve, the car crashes into a stalled harvester. 4 years pass, and the world looks different now. Darker and full of consequences that never stop arriving. Chris and his girlfriend survived the crash, but the two friends in the backseat weren't so lucky. The guilt of their deaths sits on Chris's chest every single day, like a weight he can't shift. The accident left him with severe problems, anger issues, and a brain that won't let him retain new memories. He's forced to live by a notebook, recording everything he needs to do. Every morning he wakes up and has to relearn his own existence from scribbled notes, and it never gets easier. It's devastating to watch someone who once had everything reduced to reading instructions on how to live each day, trapped in a cycle where tomorrow never brings relief. He attends classes at a life skills center to learn basic skills, but even that proves challenging. After class, he finds he's locked his keys inside the car, something that happens so often he always carries a backup key hidden in his shoe. With a heavy heart, Chris goes to catch a glimpse of his ex-girlfriend Kelly, who lost her leg in the accident and now walks through life with a prosthetic limb and 1,000 reasons to hate him. Reasons he can't argue with, because he knows her hatred is justified. After that, he checks his schedule and heads to his next meeting with Janet. He starts things off awkwardly, greeting her with an uncomfortably long hug. She asks about his life and whether he's facing any issues, but he seems more interested in her than the conversation. He makes a sexual remark, and Janet shuts him down immediately with a firm tone, attributing his lack of self-control to the brain injuries from the accident. He continues to flirt, but she reminds him she's simply there to do her job and asks what he actually wants. He thinks for a moment, then says quietly,
I just want to be who I was.
Chris goes home to find his blind roommate Lewis has left him a voicemail with a recipe for dinner. Unable to find the tin opener, he grows frustrated and starts throwing things. He calls Lewis, who drops everything and comes home to help. Chris apologizes for the mess while Lewis cooks dinner and asks Chris about school. Chris reveals he was asked to write an essay about his daily routine but couldn't think of anything after writing. I wake up. Lewis suggests approaching it like a story, starting from the end and working backwards. Chris gives it a try, and it works. Lewis tells him, you sequence just fine, you just have to start at the end and work backwards. Write that down? Later that night, Chris goes to the bank where he works as a janitor. He wants to become a clerk, but his boss, Mr. Tuttle, has turned him down. Politely but firmly, as if he's already decided, Chris isn't capable of anything more. During his shift, Chris plays with the mop, reliving muscle memory from a life that feels like it belonged to someone else entirely. A flashback reveals that he was once a highly talented hockey player, the kind of athlete people expected great things from, before the accident took all of that away and left him with this half-life instead. While Chris works, a car sits parked across the street from the bank. Inside, a man named Gary watches him. He recognizes his old schoolmate. That's Chris Pratt. He finds it pathetic that Chris is working as a janitor, but tells his friends to move forward with the plan. Later, Chris goes to a bar and tries unsuccessfully to talk to a woman sitting nearby. His social skills are clumsy and uncertain. Gary arrives and, noticing how easily a pickup line makes the girl smile, Chris starts taking notes, until Gary interrupts him, introducing himself as a classmate of Chris's sister. When the bartender tries to shortchange Chris and pocket the difference, Gary steps in and makes him return the money. Gary is charismatic and confident, everything Chris used to be and isn't anymore. And despite the asthma inhaler he pulls from his pocket mid-conversation, he moves through the world as if he owns it. Gary asks about the accident, and Chris tells him everything. Gary encourages him. Sometimes when life takes one thing, it gives back something else. Thanksgiving comes, and Chris and his friends drive out to his family's lavish home where everyone except Chris is wealthy and proud of their achievements. His parents belittle him under the guise of concern, asking pointed questions about his condition and his job in ways that make it clear they think he's a failure. There's something particularly cruel about the way families can destroy someone while claiming they're helping, turning love into a weapon that cuts deeper than any stranger's words ever could. Lewis accidentally brings up their idea to open a restaurant, but the family treats it as a joke, assuming Chris couldn't handle any meaningful role in it. Chris loses his temper and retreats to his old room, where he's met with nothing but nostalgia and memories he'd rather not revisit. The only family member whose company he genuinely enjoys is his sister, but she has to leave early with her child, passing along a message that their father wants to see him. His father challenges him to a game of chess and loses. Chris reminds him, quietly, that he can no longer play the way he used to. On the drive back, Lewis asks Chris with a serious tone not to get upset before he says what's on his mind. Chris promises. Then Lewis tells him, "I don't think you should go home anymore." Chris says nothing. He knows Lewis is right, at work. Chris's friend Ted, a police officer, stops by with dessert and tells him his wife is pregnant and always running hot, so he can't turn the heating on at home. He jokes that Chris is lucky he'll never have to deal with that. The remark stings. Chris lets it go. As Ted leaves, he reminds Chris to lock the back door. Chris jokes that Ted is the one who left his car door open. The next night, Chris returns to the bar and tries recycling Gary's pickup lines on another woman. He gets the delivery completely wrong and ends up embarrassed. A woman named Lovely approaches and buys him a drink on Gary's behalf. She tells him she used to be a dancer and is now a receptionist at the Chamber of Commerce. When she asks what he does, Chris hesitates. He keeps forgetting her name, so she writes it in his notebook so he won't lose it. Gary and his girlfriend join them, and the four head back to Gary's place, where the couple quickly disappears into the bedroom, leaving Chris and Lovely alone in the living room. She tells him she used to watch him play hockey and had a crush on him for years, recounting his heroic moments on the ice. Chris, once again, too blunt for his own good, tells her he'd like to see her naked. He's immediately embarrassed, but she takes it as a compliment and they become intimate. Later, Gary drives Chris home and casually wonders how a man with such a wealthy father ended up living somewhere so ordinary. Chris tells him his father has never visited. Gary invites Chris to join them for Thanksgiving, and as he's picked up and driven away, he calls back.
Hey, you know something? You're better than this. A lot better.
Chris lets himself into his apartment, but he can't sneak past Lewis, who smells alcohol and a woman's perfume the moment he walks in. Lewis is delighted and wants all the details. Chris tells him about Lovely, but Lewis notices the name is unusual. Chris admits she used to be a dancer and it's her stage name. Lewis asks how they met, and when Chris mentions Gary, Lewis's interest sharpens. He's never heard this name before. He congratulates his friend, but something about the whole story doesn't sit right with him. Days later, Chris goes to meet Gary and Lovely at a farmhouse. When he asks who it belongs to, the answer is vague. Gary introduces Chris to his other friends, and everything feels easy and natural until an old man with a walker shuffles in, confused, asking,
Welcome.
Who are all these people?
Whose place is this again?
Friend of a friend.
Gary tells his shady-looking uncle, Bone, to handle it. They lie to Chris that the farmhouse belongs to a friend of a friend, but even Chris can see that something doesn't add up. That night, Chris wakes up and overhears Gary's girlfriend talking to her child on the phone, promising she's working and will be home soon. He wanders down to the basement, where the rest of the group is sitting around a table. Pinned to the wall are photos of a bank, blueprints, schedules, security details, and a photo of himself. Gary tells him they're planning to rob a small bank during harvest season. When it's flush with cash, Chris asks why they'd steal from poor farmers. They insist they're not stealing from farmers, they're taking from the big agricultural corporations that pocket all the profits. It's almost impressive how easily Gary twists morality into whatever shape serves his purpose, making theft sound like justice and manipulation feel like friendship. Chris notices his own photo on the wall. Gary tries to sugarcoat the fact that he's been drawing Chris into the plan all along. He sits him down and lays out his worldview, plainly. The world runs on money and power, and nothing else matters. Your old man pays money to take care of you. If you want enough money to take care of yourself, why not? Chris says he thinks his father would give him money if he simply asked. Gary tells him to go ask for $10,000. Nothing to a man like that, fully confident he won't do it. He tells Chris to write it down. Whoever has the money has the power. Chris says nothing. He doesn't know what to say. As he's about to leave, Lovely stops him and they spend the night together. But as he leaves the next morning, she and Gary watch him from the window. She was in on it all along. Chris and Lewis meet with a financial advisor to discuss opening their restaurant. They lay out their dreams and their numbers, but the advisor shakes his head. Their estimated costs are too low, and he's not impressed with anything from the concept of serving only breakfast and lunch to the menu, where every dish is named after someone Lewis admires. Lewis stays hopeful, but Chris is distracted, silently watching Kelly across the way, still lacking the courage to approach her. In the days that follow, Chris grows increasingly angry at everything. Then a jacket arrives at his door with a note from Lovely saying it reminded her of him. And for a moment, something in him softens. That night, Chris calls his father and asks for $10,000. He tries to sound calm and reasonable, explaining he wants to open a small business sharpening skates. His father says no. He asks for just $1,000 to get started. His father turns that down too, and instead asks if Chris is in trouble, suggesting he come back home. Chris, already burning with frustration and feeling like he's begging for scraps, refuses and hangs up. He decides right then to join the robbery. It feels like the only door left open, the only way forward that doesn't involve crawling back to his family and admitting he can't manage on his own. Chris helps the gang with what they need for the heist, even taking photographs of the vault so they can plan the break-in. Gary tells him to notify them when the money arrives. His only job on the night will be to make sure his friend Deputy Ted doesn't walk in while the robbery is underway, because Ted's schedule is unpredictable and there's no way to plan around him. Lovely spends the night at Chris's place, and while he sleeps, she slips out of bed to grab a snack from the kitchen. Lewis is already up. He decides it's the right moment to have a conversation with her. He asks what she's doing with Chris. Making it clear he doesn't believe she's serious about him, he tells her about his own past, how bad company led him to cook meth in a home lab, how he was ignorant of the fume's effects, and how that ignorance cost him his sight. He tells her he won't let Chris fall into the same trap. Lovely gets defensive and claims she loves Chris. Chris hears the heated exchange from the other room, but says nothing. He doesn't know what to believe anymore. A few days later at the bank, Ted stops by to bring Chris some donuts. Chris, trying to keep him away on the night of the robbery, fakes being hurt by Ted's generosity, pretending to take it as charity. Ted seems confused but lets it go later. At a restaurant, Chris picks a fight with Lewis over nothing, telling him he's embarrassed. By the way, Lewis flirts with waitresses and that he's planning to move out and get his own place soon. Lewis, hurt by the sudden news, quietly asks for the check. The shift in his mood surprises even the waitress elsewhere in the city. Lovely sits in the back of a cab staring out the window, then stops it. She wants to see Chris one more time before she leaves. That same day, before his shift ends, Mr. Tuttle comes to find Chris. He returns Chris's card, the one listing his condition, acknowledges how hard Chris has been working, and offers him a position as a clerk after the holidays. Chris doesn't know how to feel with no one else to call. He rings Lewis, who assumes something is wrong at the apartment, but Chris tells him he's at the bank, and before he can say another word, Uncle Bone arrives with the rest of the crew. Chris tells Bone he's decided to sit this one out and promises he won't say a word to anyone. Gary's answer is a punch to the stomach.
Now go in there, get your mop, do your job, and shut your mouth.
It's too late to back out now. The robbery begins. They cut the camera wires and start melting through the safe. Then Ted decides to make a surprise visit. Gary presses a gun into Chris's back and tells him to act naturally. Ted tells Chris this will be his last shift. Another officer is replacing him because he'll be off for his child's birth. Chris congratulates him and apologizes for his earlier rudeness. Ted waves it off, assuring him it's all right. He knows Chris can't always control himself. After Ted leaves, the safe is cracked. They force Chris to bring the money out of the vault, and as they load it into the car, it seems like they might actually pull it off. Then Ted comes back with donuts for his friend. Everyone is caught off guard when no one answers the door. Ted notices Gary's reflection in the glass. Gunfire erupts, deafening in the quiet night. Ted drops 2 gang members instantly and wounds Gary. As he steps closer to Gary, Chris tries to warn him about Bone, but Ted is too focused. Bone shoots him in the back. Gary orders Bone to finish it, and he does. Gary flees through the back door, taking the car loaded with cash. Chris runs, overcome with emotion. He begins seeing flashbacks of the accident. He gets pulled over for driving without his headlights on. The same mistake that started everything. He breaks down. The officer checks his card, recognizes the condition listed on the back, and lets him go with an offer to escort him home. Chris waves him off and drives until he's alone on a dark road. He pulls over and checks the trunk. The money is there, all of it, along with a shovel and some cement. Chris drives back to his apartment. The lights are on. He calls Lewis and realizes he's not alone inside. Gary is there with him, threatening to kill Lewis if Chris doesn't return the money. Chris turns Gary's own lesson back on him. He tells Gary he'll bring Lewis to safety first, and then tell them where the money is. Chris goes through his notebook and pieces together a plan to take out Gary and Bone and save Lewis. He drives to his parents' house, grabs his father's gun, and hides it inside one of the cash bags. He falls asleep and dreams of Kelly. She forgives him. She tells him she's moved on and that he should too. Bone finds him and they force him to hand over the money. Chris tells them he can't remember where it is. Gary checks the notebook and sees that Chris buried it on the same road where the accident happened. They drive out and make him dig it up. As he reaches down for the bag, Chris spots the shoelace tied to it, the one connected to the hidden shotgun, and remembers his plan. Bone takes the other bag and tells Chris to bring the remaining one. Chris comes up from behind and shoots him down, saving Lewis. Gary, weakened by his wound, is in no shape to fight. He bleeds out while Chris stands over him and deliberately withholds the inhaler. Chris returns the money to the authorities and confesses his involvement in full detail. The FBI is skeptical that someone with his condition could have resisted the gang's pressure, but it turns out that Marty had accidentally cut the telephone line instead of the camera feed, so the footage clearly shows how Chris was coerced into participating. Mr. Tuttle, believing in Chris despite everything, gives him a loan. Chris and Lewis open their restaurant. His performance in his classes begins to improve. His father and Mr. Tuttle become regular customers. Chris starts skating again, and he holds on to the hope that one day Kelly will be ready to see him so he can finally say to her face to face what he's only ever been able to say in his dreams. Sometimes redemption isn't about erasing what you've done. It's about learning to live with it while becoming someone worthy of forgiveness, even if that forgiveness never comes. Until then, he needs to carry on and learn to forgive himself, because maybe if he can do that, others will find a way to forgive him too. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.